Okay, and with that, Doug, well, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'm going to get right to it. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Well, I'm a 64-year-old ophthalmologist. My specialty is glaucoma. Um, and everybody asks me when I'm going to retire. Hopefully, not for about 7 years or so. I'd like to keep going while I'm mentally and physically okay to do that.
Sure.
Um, the how Alzheimer affected my family is my father died at 92 of Alzheimer's, and it was a you know he was my best friend and he was the best man in my wedding. And the last year and a half, we didn't have a good relationship at all because he thought I went down to South Carolina and raided his bank account and stole all his money.
Wow.
And so for
Wow.
the last year and a half, he looked at me like, how could you steal all my money? And so, Alzheimer's has a special place in my heart, and I feel for those that have families that are dealing with it. And hopefully, we can raise the awareness of this trial and this new drug, and so we can help some families.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry to hear about that heartbreaking story. Thank you so much, Doug. You personally know two people with Alzheimer's disease that are in the semifinal open label studies. They're not under your care. As you said, you're an ophthalmologist, but you know two people that are in the semifinal open label studies. Can you tell us about them, what their symptoms were, and when did they enter the trial?
Yes, I know there's a gentleman, he's about in his early to mid 80s, and he was extremely forgetful. Um, in 1 hour, he would probably repeat himself 10 to 12 times a
Wow.
certain question. He was unsteady from an ambulatory perspective. Um, and he had difficulty comprehending the written word. He lost interest in reading, or if something was read, or if he was reading something, he couldn't really process it. The other individual was a charming late 70-year-old female who became extremely irritable and could not remember names, was forgetting things. But the biggest thing the family had difficulty with is went from a super sweet lady to a get out of her way.
Yeah. And the behavioral issues we've heard that so often they could be even worse than the cognitive decline. Thank you very much. So then,
Absolutely.
yeah, and then both of them then enter. And then I'm sorry, we didn't. I'm not sure. Then when did they enter the trials?
Yeah, they entered the trial. The one individual entered the trial December of 2020, which was a difficult time because that's right in the middle of the pandemic and the vaccines weren't out. And so the family was very brave to sort of go across country to the trial site in just outside of Miami to enter into the study.
Yes.
And the other individual, I believe, was in late January, early February 2021.
Okay. Thank you very much. So both long term, about a year. Thanks very much.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. And then how long did it take? So they've been on for about a year. How long did it take for the changes to become noticeable?
The one individual, the elderly gentleman, it took about 3 months.
3 months.
And then he's had basically steady improvement in all the areas I've listed: ambulatory, reading, as far as uh, repeating himself, forgetfulness,
Yeah.
and the other individual. It took about 4 or 5 months, but um, since then, both of them have had steady improvement in both cognitive and behavioral issues.
That's that's remarkable to hear. I wanted to mention earlier, just a reminder that we had Dr. Gonzalez Rojas way back after the 2B results, This open label was then an open label after the placebo controlled from a long time ago, and she was the first anecdotal evidence, and she was saying more than a year ago, to our surprise, to our delightful surprise, I forget what her exact words were. Patients were getting better, and she had a number of examples. But she said the same thing that Dr. Baker said, and that was that it took a couple of months, and then they started seeing it. Thank you very much, Dr. Baker. And then, very importantly, have there been any adverse effects or downsides?
No, it's a simple 100 milligram pill that they take twice a day. There's no stomach upset. There's no issues at all. I mean, it's just like taking a vitamin, and easily administered and easily tolerated, and no side effects.
Well, I mean,
I mean, it's remarkable.
yeah, a miracle. Yeah, that sounds amazing. And then, okay, so then it's been about a year for each of them, a little bit longer, a little bit shorter in each case. And then have they seemed to level off or decline a little bit or continue to get better? And before I finish that question, we know that Alzheimer's disease is a disease of continual decline. So the patient should always be getting worse. And so have you seen a level off or decline or an improvement?
Well, Joe, I just got off the phone with one of the family members prior to coming on the show. And basically, they've noticed from the 3 to 4 month mark a steady improvement. It's not rapid, but every month they seem to get better. And, from a ambulatory, standpoint, walking briskly without falling, they're not worried about him falling anymore.
Unbelievable.
He, might repeat himself twice in an hour versus 10 or 12 times. When they were passing around a sort of some lab work on one of his brothers, he told his brother that he's going to have to stop eating bacon and eggs because his cholesterol was too high.
And this is the guy that had lost interest in reading because he had a hard time comprehending reading.
Right. And so now all of a sudden he's scolding his brother for his elevated cholesterol levels.
Unbelievable.
And the other lady we just saw at a Greek choir concert for Christmas, and she could not remember names and was extremely irritable. She was back after a year to her charming personality and called everyone around the table by their name. I'm not quite sure I could do that, but that was after a year of treatment.
Wow! Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, and then there also Alzheimer's disease is a big disease for caretakers. Can you speak about the families and loved ones and what their reaction has been?
Well, it probably affects every single family in this entire world, whether they're in a facility or whether the family is taking care of them. So, with those people or families that have a member with Alzheimer's, I would strongly encourage them to enter the trial. I mean, basically, you have a 50% chance of improvement. Whereas if you don't go into the trial, you have no chance of an improvement because it's a steady march downward.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a steady march downward, and it's a disease that's always terminally ill. I'm so glad you brought up the trials. Everyone, there's rethink-alls.com or to go to Cassava Sciences website, and it links out from there. If you have a loved one with Alzheimer's disease, these phase 3 trials are enrolling right now. It's the only way to get semifelin. This drug is available if you go into if you go into these trials and you get randomized into these placebo-controlled trials. And like Dr. Baker said, the only way to get this drug is there's a 50% chance if you enter these trials and you help bring this drug to market. So please go to that website or send that website around. Thank you, Dr. Baker. Thank you for bringing that up.
The other thing, Joe, is the sooner they complete enrollment, the sooner this will get approved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and so it's one of these things that, we can't recruit people fast enough. And the faster that they recruit, the faster the results will come out.
Yeah.
And, for a drug that has no side effects, I mean, zero, why not? I don't know what the downside would be.
They had a better side effect profile than placebo in their placebo controlled. So great point. What is the downside? Yeah.
I mean, if this was 3 years earlier, I would have had my father in that study in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So I don't know if we know this. Would you happen to know? So Samir says, would you happen to know if the two patients you referenced going for a spinal tap, which is needed for the 12-month biomarker data? So they're after 12-month data. After 12 months, they're taking spinal tap of 25 of the patients. Do you happen to know if I guess the man was one of those?
No, I do not know that, and they are just finishing the 1 year.
Yeah.
So they're entering the CMS phase of the next trial, within the next month or two.
So they'll be randomized, and as you said,
yeah, I don't really know any details about their
the biomarkers.
Yeah. What the study is collecting. The only thing I know is sort of the anecdote, stories that I've seen and heard.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And so just David Arnold is just agreeing with you here and saying, my mom had AD and she had a lot of behavioral issues. It was on a cocktail of drugs. With semifilam, was there a reduction in the need for other behavioral controlling drugs? Oh, so this is a question. It's a great question. I'm glad I took it. Thank you, David. So Doug, he's asking, because there's a number of, there's behavioral issues, there's insomnia. So a lot of times people are on a cocktail of other drugs for those behavioral issues. Do you happen to know if the woman, I suppose, was she on other drugs for behavior and able to come off?
She was on no treatment before, and this is the only treatment that she's been on. That's part of the study.
Okay.
And basically those have resolved. And it took about 4 to 5 months in her, so it took a little longer. But the personality and the behavioral issues, which were significant, are gone.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how worried the family is if they're randomized to placebo and they start seeing the extreme irritation reappear. I mean, that's frightening. And Joe, as we talked about before, time is important.
Yes.
And most of these patients are elderly, and so every month, every 6 months, with their family, it's important to have meaningful time, not just time.
So whether the two patients are continuing in the CMS study, if yes, please give more talk. If not, I'm sorry, I think you did say this. They are now continuing into the CMS, correct?
Yes, both of them are, and both of them have a 50% chance of getting the drug and 50% placebo. And that's why the families are, actually both families they were actually begging the company for compassionate use because they know it's worked. And unfortunately, the company is not allowed to do that. You have to go into the 50% placebo, 50% drug trial, and so that's why they're frightened.
Question from Rainer. Do you share Remy's optimal scenario, taking semifilam prophylactically before AD becomes worse?
Well, if they prove the biomarkers, which I would, thinking that they started with the biomarkers and then moved, to find a drug that fit that. I mean, if I had low filament A and with biomarker proof of that, absolutely, I'd take it.
Me too.
I mean, I wouldn't wait till I had any problems.
Neither would
Just
I.
like, if you have glaucoma and a high eye pressure, you treat the eye pressure before you get damage to the nerve.
Yeah.
And, Alzheimer's, we're talking neural tissue that's damaged because the scaffolding is deteriorating. So if my scaffolding was deteriorating, and they had biomarker proof of that, absolutely, I'd take it prophylactically.
Myself as well. Yes, thank you. Terrific answer. Thank you. And then Michael Klein says, so do you know if the two people are part of the first 50 patients and whether they entered the CMS? So we covered the portion about, so the one is just entering the CMS now, and the one will in a couple months, or a month or two or whatever, will enter soon. But do you happen to know, because they released data on the first 50 patients, and that was a really big thing, do you happen to know if they were part of that cohort of first 50 patients?
Yeah, I am sure they were not. They're
Okay,
part of the
thank you.
2B study.
No, yes, yes. But in that, so that 2B, they had, it started as, it's up to like 200 people total. It started
Right.
as 50 people, and they released data on the first 50. Do you happen to know if they were a part of the first 50?
No, they were not.
Oh, okay, okay,
They,
thank you.
they, they were not part of the first 50.
Okay, super, thank you, thank you. So that's good news, because we saw the terrific data on the first 50, and now here's good anecdotal evidence from after that. So that's good news. So this is an interesting study design. The CMS, this is a good question, Charlie L. Thank you. This CMS, I've never seen a study like this, where you're on the drug and then you randomize off of it to see what happens. What do you think? If that's a CMS, the phase 3 is the traditional study of placebo arm and drug arm. But what do you think of this interesting CMS design?
Well, I mean, as a friend of the family, and I know that to me it seems cruel
Yeah,
that you would take, somebody off a drug that is improving. I don't think you need to prove that there is deterioration in Alzheimer's. I think that's a given.
you're right.
And so to take somebody off a medicine that's helping them, and if you can prove through testing that it has helped them, and the family can back that up with their observation, I think it's cruel to take people off that when you already know the normal deterioration of Alzheimer's. I'm not the FDA. I would hope that a year and a half of, or even further than that now, of no side effects, and you have documented improvement, in patients, I would think that would be good enough at this point, because there's been nothing like that. No drug, to my knowledge, has shown improvement. I think it was in 66% of the patients at 1 year, and another maybe 20% did not decline at the usual rate. So basically, 88% of the people, benefited from that drug with no side effects. And so,
It's incredible.
I mean, it doesn't take a genius to say, anybody's family that had Alzheimer's would put them on that medicine.
No question about it. Yeah, 100%.
With no side effects, what's the downside?
What is the downside? Why is it not on market? Yeah.
Yeah. It's certainly, why is it not available for compassionate use at this point?
And then Ayn Reedy asks, do you have any relationship, professional or personal, with Cassava Management?
No, I wish I did. I would have got in earlier, as far as I am a Saba long, so I want to make that point.
As am I. Yep.
But no, I do not know anybody.
Yep. Thank you for that. Thank you for
or
that.
have a relationship with anyone.
Yep. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Joe, let me make one other comment if I could. Another interesting thing is that these patients are improving with COVID out there. I mean,
great point.
They've been isolated, and that's when people really deteriorate, when they don't have social interaction.
Yeah.
And so, despite isolation,
great point.
they've improved. And let me tell you the story how the first patient got there. The family's brother, who's a science researcher, found out about Cassava Sciences, mentioned that to the family. And this is in December, when right in the middle of the pandemic, December 2020,
Yep.
there was no vaccine out. And the family called the neurologist in charge in Florida and basically asked the neurologist, is it worth it to bring an elderly family member across many states? Because if they got COVID, that would probably do them in. And the neurologist in charge of the study said, if it was my family member, I would make the trip. I've never seen anything like this, and I've been doing this over 20 years.
Wow.
And so basically, this family went from Ohio to Florida to be in this study. And so that is absolutely BS about cherry picking, because you don't cherry pick someone 6 or 7 states away.
And then you related the story of how your male acquaintance ended up in the study. Did you relate the story of how the female acquaintance ended up in the studies?
Um, they're they know each other,
Okay.
so it's part of a Greek community,
Oh,
and so it was sort of word of mouth.
interesting.
And um, the the one individual um, had no side effects, started to feel better, and
Oh,
they investigated it. And the second family was said, well, geez, we have a patient that's extremely irritable, cannot remember names. Why shouldn't we do it?
so
And
that's
they
wow.
really respected the first individual that went in. I mean, that family is a very accomplished, bright family, and so they knew that if they went in, they had done their homework prior to going into a trial. And so they respected that, and they said, well, it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me.
Yeah. Dr. Baker, I can't thank you and others. There's 1,000 of the thank yous here. I'm not putting out there, but this means a lot to so many people. People are trying to stop these trials, and to hear this about what's happening with the patients and how it really is like something of a miracle that you're talking about. This is like you said, this has been the graveyard of drugs. There's been no cure for this, and it's always terminal. And now it seems like there's a lot of hope. So thank you so much for bringing your message of hope today.
Joe, thank you for letting me come on the show. I appreciate the opportunity to help elevate the awareness, and I hope a couple real life stories have motivated some people to be advocates, and more importantly, get their family members or someone they know in the study,
Great.
phase 3 SAVA study.
Yeah, great reminder. Thank you. Rethink-alz.com. Go to Cassava Sciences website, in case I'm getting that wrong. Go to Cassava Sciences website and tell anybody that has a loved one with AD to try to get in those trials. Dr. Baker, thanks so much for being here. Thank you.